everybody. Welcome to Soul Brothers. And we are going to gossip and slander about everyone who doesn't listen to this podcast. So we're gonna get filled with Jezebel spirit, Leviathan, what's the other ones?
Python.
Absalom, all the spirits of the week, Python, thank you. And we are gonna gossip and slander till the cows come home because that's just the kind of people we are. So you have tuned in for a beautiful episode where obviously I'm just kidding, we're not. But we are going to talk about gossip and slander because it's kind of like the hot button issue right now, right, Keith?
Yeah, well, that's a little bit of an understatement. Uh, so I grew up in the 80s, man. Like, that was my decade. In that era, I was taught that gossip isn't necessarily a bad thing because inquiring minds want to know, right? You go into the
Are
grocery
you being
store.
serious? Like,
Well, you
are you?
had the National Enquirer, and
Oh
inquiring
yeah, I
minds
remember.
wanted to know. And man, it
That's
was
true.
full of and they called them gossip rags. Ooh, we sold this stuff on TV, so it can't be bad. So, just saying.
Okay, yeah, that's true. I do remember the National Enquirer, and I had sex with an alien or whatever kind of articles that you saw in there.
Uh,
So
who knows? That means something totally different today. So, um, well, I would love to. It's been a month since we've been together. A lot of things have been
yeah.
happening, including travel and illness. So thank God that's behind
Hmm.
us, and we're
Praise
finally
God.
back with everybody. I know you've all been crying, and you've probably been gossiping about why it's been a month, according to Nathan. So, but you're right. I mean, it seems to be certainly the hot topic because I don't know, maybe things have been happening out there in the public.
Maybe, maybe there's a little bit going on.
Yeah. So the funny thing I think is that funny as in not haha funny is that we knew we were going to do this topic a month ago before all of the
A month ago.
craziness kind of hit the fan.
Mhm.
It's just taken us this long to actually record it. But let's just jump in. Gossip and slander, obviously,
Gossip and
Nathan.
slander.
When somebody of any measure of importance has an accusation against them, if somebody states anything that might remotely, whether true or not, paint that individual as less than glowing, that must be gossip, and it must be slander, and we must not do it. That's what we're kind of led to believe, and I think that's what we're here to address directly. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to couch this for the younger generation because some of them may be listening if you're under 40 and you might is a common thing to you, but I don't know about your experience, but me growing up, like in the church, you didn't you heard about gossip and slander when you got to youth group, right? Because the youth pastor wanted to shut down the gossipy nature of teenagers. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
And so,
the chatter.
you heard, yeah. So you heard sermons on gossip, maybe not slander, but you definitely heard sermons on gossip when you got to youth group because of the teenage drama gossip, situation that you have with young people. And so it would probably be mentioned a little bit here, a little bit there, like in your youth group. And you probably got James, where the tongue is a fire, that no man can control, or something like that. And it's kind of like this teaching about like, hey, don't say mean things about other teenagers in the group, like because that's not nice, or something like that, right? But if everyone else, you younger people, now you can speak to your experience. I'm just speaking to mine. It wasn't like you heard a billion sermons on gossip and slander from the pulpit. Like you really, I don't remember hearing a lot of that, like in the adult congregation. Like it wasn't like this topic that you just constantly heard about, gossip and slander. And you didn't really hear about Jezebel or Leviathan or all the other spirits that work in apparently work in gossip and slander. You just didn't hear that much. Now, I don't know if that was your experience, but that was pretty much mine. So you young people that are hearing every other sermons on gossip and slander, that wasn't normative, back in the day. Was that you, Keith?
Well, before we proceed, I'm a little bit. I'm trying to get past the statement of framing the younger generation as below 40. So I appreciate that. Um, but no, I think you're right. I can't recall a single message from the pulpit on gossip or slander whatsoever. And I'm not saying that it didn't
Well,
happen.
yeah.
I just can't remember a single one.
I don't either. I mean, I do remember occasional sermons about like watch what you say, like make sure you're being edifying, that kind of a thing. Like make sure the things that come out of your mouth are kind and loving and stuff like that. But I don't remember a specific sermon on gossip and slander. Like I just don't remember really hearing that at all.
Hmm.
And then all of the sudden, around the early zeros, is in my experience anyway, they began to pop up, just a lot of them. Gossip, slander, and the original Jezebel kind of speech began to circulate. And then I found it was like a tidal wave as kind of like the tens or whatever the heck you call that decade. No, but by the way, everyone who's out there, let's just all agree that no one knows what to call the year 2000 to the year 2019. Like we had the 80s, the 90s, and then people said the 2000s, but that doesn't work at all because that goes all the way to 3000. So it's like 80s, 90s, and they say 2000s, but that's dumb. So they have no clue what to call it. It's like 20 to 2010. We don't know what to call that. And then we have this 2010 to 2019. No one knows what to call that either. So we just lumped this whole thing into the 2000s. And now finally we're in the 2020s. And I think we can say the 2020s, although I don't really hear people even saying the 2020s. So what the heck decade are we in, Keith?
Well, as a Bond fan, I'm perfectly fine with adopting the double O's for the first part of that era.
Okay.
But you're right. I have
Yeah.
no clue what to call the teens part of that.
Nobody knows. It's a big mystery, but that is a way deeper mystery than we can dive into today. So, but what I want to say is whatever that decade is called from 2010 to 2020, there was an explosion all over the place, like the internet, a lot of large, in particular, charismatic voices and Pentecostal voices were, it seemed like talking about gossip, slander, Jezebel, or something like that, like all the time. I mean, it was just everywhere. And one has to ask the question, why this explosion? Why wasn't it really there earlier? And now it is prolific, the talking about it. And I think so that's the first question is why the explosion in the teaching? Then of course what I think we want to get into the meat and potatoes of at some point is what actually is gossip and slander? What has it been presented as? What do most of the teachings that you may hear, especially from big name charismatic circles, but not
Hmm.
only, how is then gossip defined and preached about and taught by them? What does the Bible actually say? In other words, what is gossip and slander according to the scripture? And is that a little different than what you may hear preached? And then lastly, why? Why the explosion? And then why perhaps, which we'll see in a bit, the difference between what's presented as gossip and slander from many pulpits in recent days and what the Bible actually would call gossip and slander. Because it's probably important that we know what gossip and slander is, because none of us want to do that, which we're going to find out in a second. Gossip and slander is very naughty. Like that's clear, like all over the Bible, Old and New Testament. So those are kind of, I want to throw that at you as kind of my thought process. We're couching this whole conversation.
I love it. I never once thought about there being kind of a greater emphasis put on the topic itself, starting in the double O's. I'm adopting that, by the way. That's official from now on.
The double O's.
The
Okay.
double O's. Um, and then moving into the 20 teens. We'll just call it that for the sake of today.
Okay.
Um,
Sounds good.
but but I do know, as you were kind of positioning this, what came to mind was at least in the probably 2008 to 2010. I know that there was kind of a big push, this anti-bullying push, if you remember.
Hmm.
And you had a lot
Hmm.
of people in government, like in the Obama administration specifically, kind of pushing for this. And really, that was tabled around not necessarily bullying in the larger sense. It was very targeted toward the LGBTQ plus community,
Hmm.
eventually the trans community, and kind of you can't be against this because that is bullying. And so it was very focused on that to kind of get you to adopt that as a normative part of society and culture. So automatically putting you, if you disagreed on any basis, on the negative side of that, you're suddenly a bully if you were to speak against things that you might not believe in. So that just kind
That's
of
true.
came to mind, and I do think that that probably has some parallel to what we're going to talk about.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because I've always made the argument, and I'll still make the argument that the church, people talk about the world, impacting the church. And I do think that's true, especially culturally. You have a lot of cultural things in the world the church may adopt to be more relevant or whatever. But I think what people don't realize is that the church carries such authority. Like we talked about, the ecclesia carries such authority in the earth that when the church begins to speak things, to teach things, that it impacts the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like the world will begin to take on some of these things, and it could be in a negative way. Like if the church emphasizes a certain thing, then the world will pick that up in a twisted form and begin to sort of be influenced by that. And gosh, I had the perfect example in my mind, and I completely forgot what that example was. But maybe I'll think of it later.
Well, it
But
sounds almost like what you've
my
talked about before with there being kind of like a fake version of love, right?
yes.
In the '60s with hippies and the whole movement there that really kind of inoculated people from truly what love is, like that sort of thing. And would I be wrong in drawing that parallel?
No, that's totally true. Let me give an interesting parallel that I don't think people realize. And I'm not saying this is necessarily directly correlated, but it may be. And what I mean by that is I think that like okay, when the church begins to fall away from the simple gospel and begins to teach that it goes back because it does this all the time. It ebbs and flows throughout history. Begins to focus on behavior to get identity,
Mm-hmm.
right? So pray more, fast more, do more, serve more, give more, read more. When this is your emphasis in order to become something, right? Which is not the gospel, but it's religion. If you pray enough, fast enough, do enough, read enough, work enough, you can become a child of God, or you can become holy. You can become good enough to be used by God. So your behaviors determine your identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how you get to identity. Well, you begin preaching that from pulpits, that's going out in the spirit. Well, the world picks that up and goes, oh, behaviors determine identity. So therefore, if I act like a homosexual, if I commit homosexual acts, therefore I am a homosexual. So now my behaviors and my desires
Yeah.
actually form my identity. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah,
Like as far as
that's the
how
measure
this
by which
works.
I now define myself
Exactly.
completely. Yeah.
So when the church begins to preach certain things, there's a power and an authority to that. In the spirit, the world picks up on that, and then you'll see it reflected in kind of weird, twisted ways, like in your sexuality. To say like, well, my sexuality is now who I am. Like, this is a very bizarre concept that I think I've talked about this before, but it never existed in the history of the world. So what I mean by that is I even learned this when I was in getting my psych degree at a very secular college taught by almost all lesbians my senior year of college. And they said it. They said there was no such thing as a gay person in the throughout the history of the world. And they're absolutely right. Now, does it mean that no one committed homosexual acts in the history of the world? Of course not. People were committing homosexual acts like as far back as we have recorded history, but nobody made their identity their homosexual act. See, you
Mm-hmm.
never see this throughout all history, someone being like, well, I'm gay. This just wasn't the thing. It was, nobody thought like that. Everyone knew men with women, but you're doing gay things on the side. People recognize that people committed homosexual acts or engaged in homosexual behavior, but nobody identified. Nobody said this is my identity until the 20th century. It's a very new concept.
Hmm.
So does that am I
Yeah, it absolutely
positing
makes
this
sense.
clearly?
I don't understand why that is, but I completely track with you.
Well, and I see it as that whole loss of identity. If you don't have your identity in Christ and Him alone, you have to find it somewhere else. And so, you look at your feelings, your behaviors, your inclinations, and those now become who you are. So you're seeing this weird shift, over to that. But I don't want to get too far off of our gossip and slander topic.
Well, if we do, we'll be gossiping about it, and we can't do that.
Yes, I'm sure we will. So, in any case, what we've seen is a massive, dramatic increase in this emphasis on teachings that focus on gossip and slander, or one of the spirits that operates in gossip and slander. So, the question is why? Why this massive explosion of teaching around this topic? And then what is being taught? You know, how is gossip and slander being defined generally and most often? And then is that biblical or not? So I would ask you, Keith, why do you think all of a sudden in the 2010s or whatever, somewhere around there, we have this massive explosion of teachings on gossip and slander from pulpits, especially in the charismatic realm?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of take the track that I already started on with the example of the Obama administration and the setting up of being a bully or anti-bullying
Mhm.
really toward the direction of homosexuality and LGBTQ plus all that stuff. If we were to take it kind of in the direction coupled with what you've just talked about, what you've mentioned before with love and the things we see there and identity and kind of everything getting out of whack, it would almost seem like it's a defense mechanism. Let me rephrase this. Do you ever notice, and I think there's been a huge increase in this, probably around the same time frame if we really look at it. There's no evidence of this that I've researched or anything like that, but I would actually like to dig into it now that we're talking about it. Do you notice that there are two super popular responses to people who disagree with you, primarily
Mm,
in public
mhm.
now? You're either a
Yeah.
racist or you're a Nazi.
Mm,
One of the two. And depending on the
yeah.
moment, which one's worse? And that's the one you pick to describe. Oh, you believe this? You're just a Nazi. Oh, you believe this? You're just a
Mhm.
race. Hold on
Mhm.
a minute. We're kind of going to
Yeah.
an extreme here. And what they're trying to do is invalidate any position you have and take away any
Mhm.
credibility to any thought or any argument
Mhm.
or any disagreement that may be there by giving you, by ascribing a value not to the argument, but
Mhm.
to your identity. That's
Mhm.
exactly what they're doing. So they're trying to completely invalidate you as an individual and not the argument. And I think that there's
Mhm.
probably some of that there. So if you can discredit someone by saying as an individual they're flawed, as an individual you can't get any worse, ergo everything that individual says must be evil and wrong, then you completely kind of take the air out of the room of the argument. And I think
Mhm.
that may be a part of what's happening here. Thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously what you're describing is an ad hominem argument, which we know is a logical fallacy. Like it doesn't matter. This person may be a Nazi. That has absolutely nothing to do with the validity of their argument. Like the argument stands alone apart from the person.
Yeah.
But now people can't see that. But they're control mechanisms, right? I mean, what you're describing is a control mechanism. So if I want to win the argument, control you, control the argument, and I can successfully label you something horrible, like a Nazi or what did you say? The
Racist,
A
Nazi.
racist, yeah.
Yeah.
Like those are awful, evil things, right? So if I can label you that, in most people's minds, I've now discredited every single thing you have to say because I've gotten you to take on. They now view it doesn't matter what your argument is, good or bad, they will discard it. And I again, control mechanisms is a way to control people, manipulate people, and quote unquote win the argument without actually winning the argument.
Hmm.
So all I have to say is, well, you're a homophobe. Well, now it doesn't matter what your argument may be, like you're disqualified because you're a homophobe
Yeah.
or you're racist or you're whatever you are. So I can just now discount you. And I see the same mechanisms of control that we've seen in the church. Well, that guy's just a gossiper.
Yeah.
He's a slanderer, right? So as soon as somebody's, oh wow, they're a slanderer, they're a gossiper, they're an accuser of the brethren, right? That as soon as somebody, it doesn't matter what they're saying, it doesn't matter what argument they have, doesn't matter what evidence they present, it doesn't matter anything. It just matters that, oh, well, they're accuser of the brethren, they're a gossiper. So therefore, everything they say is discounted simply because I now believe the accusation of identity. And it again is a control mechanism to shut down truth and actual argumentation.
So this just occurred to me as you were reframing it. The labeling of people is labeling them in the most unloving identification or description possible. Nazi, pretty unloving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Racist, unloving. What would homophobe, whatever, unloving,
Homophobe. Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
If I can make your identity, if I can discredit you by being unloving, then I take
Mm-hmm.
all of the credibility from any argument or belief you have away. But isn't
Correct.
it ironic that the mere method of doing that is based in lack of love, likely to cover something that totally lacks love? Is that not odd to you?
Well, it's par for the course. You know what I mean? Like most argumentation that is easily logically refutable contradicts itself, right? They're typically self-contradicting. You understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like
yeah.
a lot of that, it's just they contradict. It's self-contradicting. Like for instance, like Zen Buddhism. I was a Zen Buddhist for a while, right? And I remember,
I love
you
it.
know this, right?
I love this.
Yeah. So my guru, he came, or yeah, he came up to me one, or was it she? Sorry, I had two gurus. One was a he, and one was a she. The she came up to me, and I was asking these questions, like, okay, let me get this right. Like, the goal is to have no desire, because in Buddhism, like, desire is the root of all evil. So therefore, the goal is to rid yourself of all desires.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? That's the goal. So I'm thinking, like, in my head, I'm going, oh, wait a second. So I asked her, I said, hey, so what you're trying to say is that we need to strongly desire to have no desires. Like, this is what you're telling me? And she kind of looked confused for a second. She goes, no, no, let's just say we choose to, like have no desires. So that was my last day of being a Zen Buddhist. But I walked out and I was like, things like that are self-refuting,
Yeah.
right? If you're telling everyone, okay, the idea is to have no desires, well, you have to desire to have no desires. The you see what I mean? Things like that tend to
Yeah.
be self-refuting, like what you just said. So arguments that aren't biblical or aren't true, aren't rooted and grounded in actual logic, reality, faith, aletheia, which is that's Greek for truth. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth. If it's outside of that, it typically will be self-refuting at some point or break down at some point.
Wow. So not only did I learn a new Greek word, but I got to hear a Nathan spiritual journey story, which I always
Oh my
appreciate.
gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, the whole LG, the whole alphabet gang argumentation is self-refuting,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like love everyone except for those that we don't agree with. So I can hate you if you disagree with me, but love everyone. We're going to base everything on loving everyone except for you. And actually, it isn't love because in order for me to love you, it's conditional. You have to agree with everything I think, feel, and believe. In
Yeah.
order for me to love you and for me to receive love from you, I also have to, you have to agree to every single thing I think, feel, believe, and do. And it's like, whoa, this has nothing to do with love. This is conformity.
Yeah.
And that's bizarre too, right? It's conformity from a group that celebrates quote unquote diversity.
Yeah.
You
Well, it's the
see what I
same
mean?
with the
So there's
tolerance
so much
cloud.
self-refutation.
It's the same with the
Yes,
tolerance
yes,
crowd. I cannot tolerate people who don't have tolerance. What?
right. And our strength is our diversity. Let's celebrate diversity, but let's get rid of everyone who disagrees with us.
Yeah, exactly.
we we want homogeneity is what we actually want, while saying we want diversity. We just want diversity with everyone we agree with and looks and talks exactly like we do. I mean, it's
We
just
just
so
want to
bizarre. It's like
diverge
this,
away from what you believe, and that's pretty much it. That's the diverse.
right? You see what I
So,
mean? How much self contradiction there is what I'm
yeah.
trying to point out. Is like, it's like, what the heck, So gossip and slander, though.
Well,
Gossip and
how do you want to
slander.
dig into it? Because certainly we've kind of
Well,
set the stage for it, but maybe the next question, which you've already touched on, is what the heck is it? What is gossip?
well, well, before we even get there, I think to answer the question, or at least in part, answer the question of why the explosion.
Mm-hmm.
I think because in the early zeros is when you really began having a lot of people begin to get a voice via the internet. So, vlogs and blogs exploded, right? At the latter half of the 90s into the zeros. And so what you had was a lot of people who didn't have positions of authority in a church, didn't have positions of authority in government, didn't have a voice really outside of like, I'm just going to talk to my ticked off neighbor who agrees with me. It was like now you have like this platform. And what that did was challenge certain beliefs that were held about a lot of different things. But to focus on the church, you had people kind of coming out and questioning, what about this? What about that? And that had legitimate questions, maybe their whole time growing up in the church or whatever, and now we're voicing them. And that became, and I know this is not my opinion. I actually saw this on the inside with some big names that I grew up with. That became a big threat to people's worldviews, to the mechanisms that they had created that kind of fostered their image. And so instead of actually addressing or arguing like Charlie Kirk style, like let's argue, let's be in an open forum where we can have ideas, it was shut it all down by labeling it gossip and slander. So all of a sudden, everything anybody said that was didn't agree with my vision for the church, my vision for the ministry, the foundations that I've laid, that I'm building my kingdom on, about what I teach about prayer or all this stuff. Anybody who doesn't agree with me on all of those levels and is anywhere near my church, they're now a gossiper and a slanderer. So I've now labeled them that. So any disagreement at all is now labeled gossip and slander. And therefore, like we talked about before, I can shut you up. I can just shut, no one's going to listen to you now because you're a gossiper. And well, nobody wants to associate with a gossip or a slander. And the Bible says not to. So you're like, well, I'm trying to be biblical. And gosh, you're a gossip and a slanderer. And so I can shut everything down that you're saying.
But do you think that that the real threat wasn't necessarily to, the thought process or even the individuals, but perhaps the biggest threat was insecurity and the inability to be able to defend. Like most people, it seems, can tell you what they believe, but they have no idea why they believe it whatsoever. And because of that, they can't defend it. And I'm just talking about biblically and about biblical talk. I mean, just about anything almost, right? Most people have strong opinions, but have zero idea of why they have that opinion or belief.
That's true. And so if you're insecure and cannot defend your position, it's just much easier to attack the person, to do an ad hominem, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Ad hominem means against the man in Latin, by the way, for everyone who doesn't understand what we're talking about. Like an ad hominem is against the man, an attack against the person. So it's just easier to do that. It's easier to just slander your slanderer, right? It's easy to just, once again, it's self-refuting, to gossip against your gossiper, label what you're doing discernment and protecting the sheep, and what they're doing is gossip, slander, and division. So as soon as you can do that, you paint yourself as the holy man holding up the righteous, you know, things in the church, and everyone who disagrees with you, it's not that. And oftentimes it is because you're insecure. You can't actually back up what you're saying. You don't even know why. You're probably just regurgitating what somebody else told you at some point in your Bible college or something, or your previous church experience, and now you're like barfing it up, and you don't even know why. And you've passionately said it, and anybody disagrees with you, you just feel insecure, so attack the person to shut them down and limit their influence. Because again, it goes back same thing. It's a control mechanism. If I can label everyone who disagrees with me or anything our church teaches at all as a gossip and slanderer, I can effectively shut it down within my church and exercise more control.
Sounds terrible. I'm glad to know I've never been a part of that on either end.
Man, me too. I'm so glad this never happened to me before, because that would be awful if it did. So yeah, I think it's a good idea to talk about what is God, what does the Bible actually have to say about gossip and slander? Like, first of all, before we even get into what gossip and slander is, what does the Bible say about it?
Okay.
And it has a heck of a lot to say about it. If you camp on, I've often joked about this, and it's totally true. We don't have, well, I only put a couple of verses from Proverbs in here, mostly because there's a billion verses in Proverbs. So Proverbs 20:19 that basically say the same thing. They say it over and over again, like just in different ways. Um, so this is probably one of the most famous or popular ones. So if you look at Proverbs 20:19, it says this: He who goes about as a slanderer reveals secrets. Therefore, do not associate with a gossip. So clearly, whatever slander is, is really bad. And this, by the way, is a rhyming thought, right? In
Mm-hmm.
in Hebrew. So you're just saying the same thing in different words, right? You're saying like he who goes about as a slanderer reveals secrets, therefore do not associate with the gossip. So whatever gossip is bad enough that Proverbs is like, you don't even want to be around this guy. Make sense?
Yeah.
So then there's Proverbs 11:13. Did you want to read that one?
Yeah. Let me if I can get to it. So
Proverbs 11:13. It's the same thing, just said in a different way.
he who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy conceals a matter.
Okay, so it's almost the exact same thing, right? So instead of saying slanderer reveals secrets, he goes about as a tale bearer reveals secrets. And that gives you the intimation that whatever they're saying isn't true, like a tale bearer, like they're telling a story in a distorted way. And then he was trustworthy, conceals matter, meaning doesn't tell stories that are fanciful,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't exaggerate, that kind of a deal. So gosh, there's a lot of these. Do you want to do 1628? I just want to kind of drive the point home here, but
Yeah. So far,
Proverbs
this sounds
16:28.
like the 1628. So far, this sounds like the biblical version of "loose lips sinks ships." So,
Pretty much.
a perverse man spreads strife, and a slanderer separates intimate friends.
So what you see here again, same thing. If people don't know this, like Proverbs is wisdom literature, so it's written poetically. So you have these kind of rhyming thoughts that go back and forth like that. And you'll see this all over Proverbs that uh so again, a perverse man spreads strife. In other words, whatever this is, there's a very intentional goal here, right? Like it seems that these people, whatever slander and gossip as it's used throughout Proverbs, it seems pretty clear that the intent is to cause problems, right? The
Mm-hmm.
intent is not to bring truth. The intent is to specifically divide people and do it in such a way as you're introducing a falsehood at some level. Is that agreed? You
Yeah,
know?
and I think it's certainly interesting that all of these ascribe a value to the individual's character, perverse
Yes.
as opposed to trustworthy as the example. I mean, that's a clear integrity, character-driven
Hmm.
description
Yeah.
of the two type of people.
It seems that whoever operates in this gossip and slander and whimsical tales, that's another way to translate tale bearer, are there is a severe character defect
Hmm.
that it isn't just what they're doing, it's the motive behind what they're doing. So there's a both and here, and you're going to see that in the words themselves, especially as we get to the New Testament. It's not just the action, it's actually the motivation behind the action. So Proverbs 26:22, I can read that.
Okay.
The words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels, and they go down into the innermost parts of the body. The words of a whisperer. This could also be translated gossiper. So it's like, again, it's like they're sowing discord,
Hmm.
sickness into people. And there's an intent behind doing that. It's not like what you're going to see consistently is it's hard to be a gossiper and a slanderer unknowingly. Like typically, these are people who have a motive, and the motive is to cause division, to hurt people, to get people under themselves, like that kind of a thing.
This is the first one, unless I'm mistaken, and I'll have to look back, but this is the first one that seems to really describe the temptation to the receiver of those tales, of those
Mm,
whimsical tales.
yeah,
The
yeah,
dainty morsels, the little delectable things that are so
mhm,
tempting and delicious and, naughty because they have a million calories, whatever it is. It seems to
right.
kind of speak to the fact that it's almost irresistible to
Hmm.
to want to
Yeah.
hear that.
Hmm. So there is that there too. Whatever this is, this gossip, slander, whisperer, talebearer, there is a seductive
Mm,
element to that. There's a seductive part of it, like a sinful whole. And you're going to see, I always just joke about this, but if you read the entire book of Proverbs, which of course I've done many times, what you'll find is it basically boils down to two things: never talk and never have sex. That's the whole book of Proverbs. So, because every other thing is like, don't ever say anything, don't talk, don't be a gossiper, don't be a slanderer. And the second part is stay away from women who are seductive. Like that's literally what it says, like over
oh
and over.
man.
Stay away from the adulteress, stay away from the seductress, this kind of thing. Like, okay, well, there you go. That's wisdom according to Solomon.
Shut up and abstain from sex. That's Proverbs.
Yeah, that's pretty much that's all of Proverbs. I mean, not with your wife, obviously, but yeah, any sort of illicit sex, don't ever engage in it, and then never talk, and you will be holy before the Lord. So this Proverbs 6:16. Do you want to read that and following? Because it's really 16 through 19, and this is a this is an often quoted verse.
Sure. There are 6 things which the Lord hates. Yes, 7 which are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that run rapidly to evil, a false witness who utters lies, and one who spreads strife among others.
Okay, so obviously these things are things that God hates. Haughty eyes is pride. And again, what you're going to see is a lying tongue. What you're going to see is oftentimes associated with people who spread strife, people who are gossipers, slanderers. There's an element of a lie. Like there's an untruth that's coming out here. Hands that shed innocent blood. Obviously, that's pretty scary in our current cultural climate. A heart that devises wicked plans. Same thing. It's like people who are motivated by they're wicked. Like they have a goal to do something wicked and awful. Feet that run rapidly to evil. Obviously, people that want to go to evil and run to it. And then here it is, a false witness who utters lies. So that's a double negative. A false witness, right? Someone who is lying and then who utters lies. Someone who is a liar and utters lies. And then that leads into spreading strife among brothers. Well, how are you spreading strife among brothers? Well, you're lying. This is always you'll see gossip and slander associated with an untruth of some kind.
But that doesn't seem to be any type of untruth. That almost seems to harken back to Exodus 20:16. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. It seems to be more of a like a character assassination. It's not. Do I look fat in this dress? No, you look fine. That was a lie. That doesn't seem to be that kind of thing. It seems to be
No.
more of there's something specifically targeted to harm an individual or an individual's reputation.
Correct. Yeah, and there's always a element again of a lie behind that. So there's a lie and an intent. And that's what you see all the way through Proverbs, and you're going to see it in the words in the New Testament as well. There's lying at some levels. There's some twisting of reality coupled with an intent. Like you're twisting the reality and you're lying with the intent to harm somebody's reputation or harm somebody's relationship. This is the goal. And you see that consistently. So we
So
could literally
before we
sit
move
here
on,
all
though, Nathan,
day.
I think that one thing that you
Yeah.
just said, I think is worth at least maybe revisiting later or just noting kind of in the back of your mind at the moment. The intent things is big because you might think something's true and you don't have any malicious intent whatsoever in your heart, your mind, whatever. That seems to be a little bit different if the intent isn't there.
Mhm. It is. I mean the Bible's big on heart and it's big on intent. It's big on huge, especially in the New Testament, but both New and Old, on what undergirds a law. Remember, for instance, like Jesus did not follow the letter of the law.
Hmm.
Deuteronomy says, "Do not." Is it Deuteronomy or Lamentate? What Leviticus? Leviticus says, "Do not touch a leper," right? Or you become unclean.
Hmm.
And then Jesus touches a leper in direct violation of the letter of the law. But the key is the laws were never about the letter of the law, they were about the spirit of the law. In other words, why do we have this law? That was the point. Why do we have a law that says don't touch a leper? It's not just memorize the laws. Why do we have it? Well, the reason they had a law back then that said don't touch lepers is because if you did, you could get sick. You could become unclean. So, what was the point? The point of the law was to keep people healthy, to keep people well. That was the point of that law. Jesus comes and he touches a leper in direct violation of the letter, but very much keeping with the spirit. So, in other words, instead of himself becoming unclean, he made them clean. And what was the intent of the law? To keep people healthy. So, Jesus kept the spirit of the law, which was to keep people healthy by making them healthy. Make sense? So,
Absolutely. That's
that's
awesome.
that that one's for free. but I think it kind of ties into this conversation, meaning it's about the intent, the spirit behind what you're doing, right? Like, and that is clear all the way through the Proverbs. And when we get into the words in the New Testament, the same thing you're going to find over and over, which is what is your intent in doing what you're doing? There's something gross in your heart that is motivating your speaking things to people, you know?
That
So,
was an
yeah.
awesome freebie. Thank you.
You're totally welcome. I just wish people could get all of that because it's like if you have a rule in your church, why do you have it? Make sure that that rule still needs to be there. This is a total tangent, but maybe this is a good idea. I thought that was so cool. I learned this from the Amish people when I did all that Amish ministry. You remember this, right? You were there for me being the Amish youth pastor for 6 months.
Oh, this is awesome, by the way. Go ahead.
Amish and Mennonite people. Yeah, like oh, what a interesting time in our life. Anyway, wonderful, beautiful people. It's just weird for us because we didn't understand and never did anything like that before. But anyways, I remember one of them told me that the rule in the Mennonite church was that when you bought a car, it had to be black. That was a rule. And even now, so right now in the Mennonite church, you can buy nothing but a black car. So some people, when they couldn't find a black car or find the black car that they wanted, would actually buy a white car and then pay 10 grand or whatever to have their brand new car that's white painted black. Now, now they're spending $10,000 on top of a new car just to get their brand new car painted black because the rule is you have to only buy black cars. So I remember talking to this guy that was a Mennonite and saying, "What the heck?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "Because when cars were first invented and Henry Ford popularized the Model A and then the Model T, the cheapest car you could buy because came standard black. So the idea behind the rule of buying an only black car was that you would save money. You'd be a good steward of God's money, right? The idea behind buying a black car was that you'd be a good steward of the money God has given to you, that you wouldn't spend ostentatiously, that you would be wise and good with your money. So therefore, buy a black car because they're cheaper. There's no reason to pay more for a different color because it's utilitarian, right? So that's that. And now that rule stays 100 years later, and it is actually having the opposite effect. In other words, now we're trying to follow the letter of that law, and now we're wasting money on painting a brand new car a different color to keep the letter of the law and in fact violating the very spirit of the law. Anyway.
But that whole mentality permeates all of society. I mean, it's that way for businesses, which have processes and policies and procedures, which are there to kind of drive sustainability and efficiency, but
Mhm.
can absolutely cut off any sort of efficiency or improvements or continual improvements in any way because it's so restrictive, or it's seen many times in many industries is so you've got to follow this process even if it makes it worse. Well, why?
Mhm.
The process is there to help you, not so you can be a slave to the process. So that seems very much in line with this.
Yes. So, getting back to the gossip and slander, it's like it's really important to know what gossip and slander is. I think we've already established, at least from an Old Testament perspective, that there's intent and an element of deception involved. In other words, you can't just like say some stuff and have 100% intent to love and 100% to intent to convey truth and be a gossip and slanderer. There's these elements always of like deception or malicious intent at some level. You see it coupled with that all the time.
Okay,
So, do you want to make our way to the New Testament here?
let's do it.
We could we could spend an hour literally going through all they're all over the Proverbs. I mean, it's just again and again and again. So, suffice to say, it's the same point said a billion times. So, okay. is if you want to go to Second Corinthians 12, 20. So do you want to go ahead and read that? This is where you get this inclusion of the words slander and gossip in the same list.
Okay. For I am afraid that perhaps when I come, I may find you to be not what I wish, and may be found by you to be not what you wish, that perhaps there will be strife, jealousy, angry tempers, disputes, slanders, gossip, arrogance, disturbances.
It's interesting this whole way he frames this. Like I love how Paul's like he's literally saying, I'm actually kind of afraid to come out there because I'm afraid I'm going to find you to not be what I want you to be. And I'm afraid you're going to find me to not be what you want me to be. You know? And he's like, instead, I'm afraid I'm going to find all this other stuff. Strife, jealousy, angry tempers, disputes. And here you have slanders, gossip, arrogance, disturbances. He's like basically saying, I'm afraid that y'all are going to be broken up over a bunch of crazy stuff, like jealousy and anger and all of these other things. Um, so what do you think about that so far?
Yeah, I'm tracking. I'm afraid when I get there, I'll find that you just don't play nice.
Yeah, basically. I'm afraid you're going to be acting like children and angry over stupid things. Like jealousy is a petty thing.
Hmm.
Like you're going to be angry tempers, right? These are things that would be assigned to children. Like basically what he's saying is I'm going to find you super immature. Like you'll be jealous over nothing. You're going to have having little temper tantrums. You're going to be dividing over stupid things. That you're going to be making up lies about each other. He's basically saying, I hope I don't find you to be like kindergartners
Yeah.
in the spirit. That's what he's saying. He's like, I really hope that finds you like throwing temper tantrums and making stuff up about each other. He's like, you better not be doing that.
All right.
So that's the first thing. So we'll get to those words in a second. The other one is Romans 1:29. And again, there's a lot of ones, scriptures that include gossip and slander in what's called a vice list. I just thought it would be just good to go over a couple of those. Just understand these are a lot of these vice lists include the words for gossip and slander, one or the other or both, throughout Paul's letters. But so do you want to go ahead and actually start with if you want to read Romans 1:28, uh, all the way to the end of the chapter. So 32.
Okay. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do those things which are not proper, being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them.
Okay, so without going into, because it would get us off track, the whole context of Romans 1 and who is he talking about and what is this all about? He's clearly talking about people who have fallen so far away from God is that they don't even acknowledge his existence anymore. Like he's literally framing these people as atheists, if not in total theology, he's framing them as atheists in behavior.
Yeah.
That's what he means by it. They did not acknowledge God. They did not even acknowledge God any longer. These are people who don't even believe. And he's saying because they don't even believe in God, God has just handed them over. Like that's a course you want to go on, knock yourself out. And this is going to be the result of that.
Mm-hmm.
So and it includes all these other things. I mean, it just gets worse and worse and worse. Like, and in there he includes gossips and slanderers, haters of God. Like he throws he said these are worthy of death. It's like, holy smokes, Paul. Like, but you understand why he's so ticked off because they have basically rejected God. They've wandered so far away from God that they've ended up in this state of really a bad place. So
Yeah, and there's a flow too, right? You kind of describe a bit of actions, right? The behaviors: greed, envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice, slander, gossip, down
Mhm.
to more toward the intent, or rather the defining of their character, which parallels what we talked about earlier:
Mhm.
untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful.
Mhm. Yes. Yep. So this is what happens. Like they've given up on God, therefore their identity is no longer in Christ, it's no longer in God. And so God has given them over to exactly what they've chosen to go after. And then this is the ultimate result of that. So, anyways, suffice to say, gossip and slander, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, carry the same kinds of meanings, which is they're naughty. Like we know these are really bad things, and they carry an element of deception and intent, like a really nasty heart,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's always a nasty heart behind this kind of thing. So, you ready
Yeah,
to dive into now the
let's
actual
do.
words gossip and slander? And then I really want to, maybe before we open that can up, let's we talked about earlier, like how these are control mechanisms, how instead of teaching people what gossip and slander really is, how it's framed from the pulpit that I've heard, and you can tell me your own experience if it's different than mine. But almost every time I've ever heard it framed from the pulpit, it's framed like this: anyone and everyone who said one negative word ever about leadership, about our teaching, about theology that we disagree with is a gossip and slanderer. And therefore, you cannot ever listen to them. And anyone in this room who has a thought or a feeling that in any way does not line up 100% with everything we're saying and teaching and doing needs to get out. Because if you stay, or at least shut up. So either shut up or get out, because otherwise you're a gossip and slanderer. If you have a thought, a feeling, or any words at all that diverge one iota from what we teach, what we believe, and what we do. And God help you if you say it out loud, because if you say it out loud, you are a gossiper and a slanderer, and we're going to murder you. So get the heck out of our church. This is how I have heard it taught. Yes or no, Keith?
Yeah, it's very much a how dare you question me? Do you not
Mhm.
know who I think I am? Type thing. It is truly the Christian equivalent of calling somebody a Nazi and a racist. And it's ascribing and then honestly, what I really think's worse than that is what you just alluded to, and that's the accusers of the brethren.
Mhm.
Dude, do we not see that in Revelation to essentially refer to Satan? So what you're
Mhm.
doing is you're calling
Mhm.
people the spiritual equivalent of a Nazi. Truly,
Mhm.
you are Satan or you are satanic. That is what
Mhm.
they're saying at that point. Just because
Mhm.
you had the audacity to question me or to call me out on something that I needed to be called out on.
Yep. I mean, think about what you're being called. If you're exactly what you said, like a gossip, slanderer, accuser of the brethren. That's literally what Satan is called. So now you are being called a tool of Satan. Like you might as well be a demon, Keith.
Mm-hmm.
Like you are a tool of Satan for having a different opinion or a different approach to a scriptural topic. And it is crazy. Like the amount of people go on in sermons about gossip and slander and what the effect, and here's what I think is a bad fruit. Well, there's a lot of bad fruit of this, but the effect of this kind of teaching and twisting of what gossip and slander actually is, which we'll get into in a moment, is to cause people to conform. It's a cult-like atmosphere. It doesn't allow for free thinking. It doesn't allow for free questioning. It doesn't allow for different opinions. It
Hmm.
doesn't allow for a different perspective. It doesn't allow for disagreement. It doesn't allow for any of those things. And it shuts it down. And here's the other thing. I talked about this in my book, actually. But I believe we're living in a time where, and this happens in all reformations, like whether it's with Martin Luther or some of the revivals over the years, God begins to reignite the simple gospel. God begins to breathe life on the simple gospel. And people begin to have awakenings of their own. They have theological awakenings, they have spiritual awakenings as God breathes the simple gospel and the Father's love into the hearts of people. And what that means is their discernment kicks up. In other words, when they begin to go, when they hear something that is antithetical to the simple gospel, it irks them. They feel it. It affects them in a way it didn't before. And when God begins to move on a generation, and a lot of people begin to go, ugh, ew, that didn't feel right. That didn't sound right. It's a God-given discernment, it's a spiritual gift of discernment, going something is either wrong about what was said or something's wrong about the spirit behind what was said.
Hmm.
Something is off, and they're beginning to awaken to the simple gospel. And as soon as they voice any of that, the person from the pulpit goes, gossiper, slanderer, accuser of the brethren. And now they're going, oh no, oh no. All of these things I'm feeling and thinking must be demonic. I need to shut it all down in the name of being holy and in the name of honoring leadership, because I certainly don't want to be a gossiper and a slanderer. And now you have people walking with this tension in their spirit where they're like feeling gross, but crucifying the flesh. In other words, they start trying to crucify the very feelings that God is bringing up that are actually rooted in springing from discernment. But somebody tells them, die daily, crucify yourself. And so they're like, well, I got to kill all of these feelings so that I can be in line with the leadership here. And that is a very dangerous and spiritually abusive practice.
Spot on. I can't add to it.
Okay, I was like, what are you going to say? Yeah. So I'm just saying right now, I think we have this going on all over the place. And it's very important that we don't step into gossip and slander. It's also very important that we don't suppress actual discernment and what God is speaking to people. So yeah, in that vein, I don't know if you want to jump into like the Greek word for gossip, because gossip and slander are different things in the Greek. They're not the same word,
Okay.
which is why they're used, which is why you see both words like gossip and slander. So to understand what gossip is versus what slander is and things like that. So do you want to start
I am
with the
always
Greek word for
open
gossip?
for more Greek. So hit me up.
Okay, so the Greek word is actually pisithuristes. Pisithuristes. It's one of my favorite words, which is or favorite letters in the Greek alphabet, which is C. C. It actually makes that sound. So it's pisithuristes, and that literally means the word we usually translate gossip. It literally means like to whisper or to speak something in secret. So that's what the word. Now I actually I cut out a section of my book that I wrote. So, do you want me to read that, or do you want to read that? I actually cut out a little section of my book to explain this word.
I, I will let you read it, but before you do, I will just let you know I will always remember this word now. Pisturistes. I have to practice that.
Yeah, pisituristes.
But
Yeah,
but to whisper. Have you ever noticed that when you're going to whisper to somebody, you always go, psst, psst?
that's true. I did
I'll
not think
always
of that.
remember it. So go ahead, please,
Well, there
sir.
we go. That's a good memory technique. Okay, so I'll describe this is literally right out of my book. I just copied and pasted my book on what this word means. It is an activity which is malicious and specifically designed to undermine the unity and love of a community of people. This is literally what the word means. So this activity is designed to do those things, undermine unity and love. So examples of gossip would be someone lying about or exaggerating the faults of another in order to get people to not associate with them or at least think in negative terms about them. Gossip is similar to slander, but one of the differences is that slander is specifically designed to malign the reputation of an individual, while gossip is designed to spread rumors to cause division and strife within a community. Gossip may include slander, but may not be exactly the same thing, as gossip is less public, hence the root of the word meaning to whisper. Gossip is usually done secretly, while slander is done more publicly, right? So, in other words, if I'm going to sue you for slander, it must mean you did something publicly, right? Like you can't
Mhm.
sue me for gossiping about you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I can't sue you for gossip. I can sue you for slander. Why? Because slander is public. Gossip, by definition, would be in secret, in private. So gossip is done secretly while slander is done more publicly. This is, I put in my little book here. This is why people can be sued for slander because it is public defamation of one's character. While gossip would be much harder to criminalize due to its hidden nature. So, do you see kind of the difference between gossip and slander in
Yes.
a general sense?
Yeah. And libel is closer to slander. It's just written.
Correct. It's exactly like slander, it's just the written version of it. So, but gossip is something by definition that you're doing in secret. But it's not just in secret, it's you're doing it in secret with the intent of causing division within a community of people by virtue of exaggerating or lying about someone else
Yeah.
with the specific intent to divide. So does that make sense?
Yeah, and both can impugn someone's character, either, and
Hmm.
this suggests wrongfully so. I think that's probably the
Hmm.
key. I'm wrongfully speaking against what your character actually is, as
Right.
opposed to perhaps telling the truth about something. That would not be slander. It would just be
That's
calling it what it
correct.
is.
Right. Yes, exactly. So both of these words carry with them the weight of a falsehood. So it means that they're either a direct falsehood or they're said in such a way you may actually say something true, but it's said in such a way as to create a false understanding. So that I did a deep dive on both of these words, and that's so you could actually say the truth, but you're saying it in such a way as to sow a falsehood.
You're implying something. You're using the
Yes.
truth to imply a falsehood.
Yes. Let me give you an example. It would be like, let's say you see a guy at church and a woman who walks by him and he glances over at her and he looks at her for a little bit too long. But let's say he's not actually like, gawking at her. Let's say he's actually, you ever do the thing where you, I know everyone does, where you kind of stare at something and your eyes do that weird thing where they almost cross and you're kind of tired and you don't really want to look away, but you
Oh yeah,
realize you're staring at
you're
a
kind
thing.
of
You know what I'm talking
fixated
about?
without actually
Yeah,
staring with intent.
correct. Yes.
It's more of
So
staring
let's
in a
say somebody,
direction instead of at something.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So let's say somebody was doing that. They weren't actually gawking at this woman. They were just staring in that direction because they were actually fixated on something else. And then they turned back. Okay. So a gossip would be somebody comes up to someone else and goes, did you see, so and so, let's say Pastor so and so in the church? He stared at that lady for like 10 seconds and then you walk away. Well, did you lie?
No.
No, he actually did stare at the lady for 10 seconds. So that was true, but you said it in such a way as to sow or intimate that there was nefarious or lustful motives behind that.
Yeah. And you could
So
even be
do you
more
see the
true.
difference?
You could even say, Pastor so and so stared in Sister so and so's direction for 3
Hmm.
minutes.
Yeah,
That is spot on.
and that's true.
It didn't even suggest he was looking at her, just in
Totally
her
could be true.
direction.
Right. Or let's say, let's just use myself as an example. So as a bodybuilder, let's say I wear a string tank top, which I do sometimes because I hate being hot. So let's say I wear a string tank top, and somebody says, and let's say that there was a women's meeting going on at the church, and I had to swing by to pick up my guitar. So let's say that was the case. And I swing by and I walk into the room and I'm like, okay, at least I can't get my guitar and get out of there. And somebody goes, "Did you know Pastor Nathan was all pumped up from the gym and he walked into the women's meeting with a string tank top?" Now they'd be telling the truth, right? It's true. I did do that. I've not actually literally done that, but let's say that I did. So I did actually do that. But see, they're telling the truth, but the intent behind it is to paint me as in some way trying to, peacock. Do you know what that means? Like we call
Yes,
it
and I love
peacocking.
the
Like you're
fact that you just
you,
used that term.
okay, yeah. So in some way I'm trying to peacock or I'm trying to, make myself alluring or whatever to the women in the church. So that's being intimated. So that's gossip. You see what I mean? Because the idea is you're actually saying something true, but you're doing it with the intent to cause people to think poorly of someone. You see what I mean?
Yeah, listen, for the record, and anybody listening, if I ever reach your level of muscles, I'm swinging by everywhere in a string tank top to pick up everything. I don't care.
You're
That
gonna
will be
live in a
my
string
intent.
tank top.
That will absolutely be my intent. I am perfectly fine with it. Start spreading the news, people. So,
Keith's gonna be naked today. All right.
all right.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, you see what I'm saying here. It's
Yeah,
it's you're either spreading a falsehood or you're spreading something in a way as to paint someone in a negative light,
sure.
to purposefully impugn their character. That is gossip. And
But
then
and that's going to
slander
pick up
would be to
speed.
do.
I mean, we all know how this works. We
Mhm,
played it in kindergarten,
mhm, you got
right?
it.
It starts here. By the time it gets there, it is.
Hmm.
Nathan entered
Hmm.
with no clothes on
Right,
and did,
right.
whatever.
And
And
danced around like that guy on the pole from that church a while ago, or whatever.
I mean, that's what it will turn into because the whole network
Yes,
of the yah and will happen. So,
yes. Yeah. Then it goes from that to he's just a show off. He just wants to all the attention on him. You see what I mean?
hmm,
That's gossip. And it's like, well, how do you know that? Like, I mean, maybe I was swinging by on the way home to get my guitar and get the heck out of there. You see what I mean? I had
yeah.
no intent of that. So that's how gossip works. Then it builds on that. And then it creates division and impugns people's character. So the exact same thing is true of slander. But slander is done publicly, more publicly.
Gotcha.
To again, there's a falsehood attached to it, and there is malicious intent attached to it as well. It's not like we have a lot of exposure ministry right now. And you know what? Some of that may be some gossip and slander. I don't know. But I guarantee you, because I know some people involved in it who have come out and exposed some people, it is absolutely not gossip and slander. There is no malicious intent. It's simply, I want to shine light on an area of hurt and wound to keep others from being hurt and wounded by the same individuals or church. So that's not gossip and slander. You're actually bringing forth truth with what's motivating you is love. What's motivating you is protecting of others, the glorification of Jesus. That's your motivation. And that actually does make a big difference in terms of what is gossip and slander and what isn't.
And that alone should tell you exactly how dangerous it is for anybody screaming gossip and slander if questions are ever brought out.
Hmm.
Even if those questions or the accusations are false, then certainly fight the false accusation. But just because somebody's calling out something doesn't make it slander or God, or just because you're talking about it with somebody. Hey, what are your thoughts on this that you've heard? Maybe you're there with another
Hmm.
church member. Hey, have you heard this? What do you think? Oh, we can't talk about it. That's gossip. No, it's not.
Hmm.
It's a fact.
Hmm.
It's a fact. It's a reality. You can certainly discuss your
Right.
thoughts, your feelings. Hey, is there
Hmm.
evidence to support this, or is there not?
Mhm.
that's called making a determination based on root cause analysis, not gossip and slander.
And I'm really glad you brought that up because every human being has the right to process something with another human being, especially your spouse, your very close confidants.
Hmm.
I mean, you certainly have the right to go, this is what I went through. This is what I saw. This was what was said to me. Give me some feedback. Can you talk to me about this? Because I'm not sure what's going on. Like, we can speak very well into this because I was treated a particular way at a ministry that Keith and I were both a part of. And I came to Keith as one of my best friends out there, probably my best friend out there for sure. And I came to Keith and his wife and said, this is what happened to me. Can you speak into this? Like, am I off here? This was my experience. Can you talk to me about that? So I had someone to process it with. We weren't building a case towards anybody. We weren't like trying to gossip and slander anybody. We were simply trying to ascertain truth and ascertain what would then be a good step from here.
Yeah.
Is that am I not
Yeah,
painting
a
that correctly?
1,000%. And I can tell you, if you wonder if that was gossip and or slander, let me also share this. Nathan is absolutely the person in this situation who says, I'm not sharing it with anybody. I'm not talking publicly about it. I refuse to answer questions about it. I refuse, all of these things precisely because, even if it's true, I just don't want to kind of spread any potential division or
Mm-hmm.
impact somebody else's experience or negatively. Maybe where I might be the only one, that sort of thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
in no way was there any desire to publicly, I'm the burn the house down guy, right? I'm the guy who's like, heck yeah, dude, it's time to blast this from the rooftop. Nathan is not that dude whatsoever, because love completely overpowers Nathan. I'm not quite at that point apparently. So so I would love to burn it down most times. So if that's there, then man, hold on, there's something more, way more.
Mm-hmm.
That whole intent thing suddenly becomes no question whatsoever. But
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly, I think you're exactly right. You do have that, and you should do that, and you should do it wisely. I don't think that you shouldn't be out there processing it necessarily on social media in front of everybody. Certainly there's a time to expose things or bring things to light publicly,
Mm-hmm.
but that initial processing, the talking through things, you know, that is very therapeutic. It helps you bring some clarity to things, and you should find that trusted
Mm-hmm.
confidant or group of trusted
Mm-hmm.
confidence, that inner circle, so to speak, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
share and to gain some wisdom from.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, again, especially in cases of abuse,
Mm-hmm.
of any kind, because sometimes people who have been abused, and I know this, oh gosh, I've counseled so many people, they carry around this hurt and pain, but they were told they weren't abused. They were told it was like their fault or whatever. And so they have all these symptoms and they're carrying on such pain of people who have been abused, but they've been told they weren't. So they were, and if they were to talk to anybody about it, it's gossip and slander. And so they just buried it. And then they end up really sick, because we have a need from God to have healing and to be able to express. And if you can't, if remember I said, Jack
Mm-hmm.
said, and it's true, a need is anything that if it's unmet causes sickness. And healing causes you to be well and then mature and grow. And people that aren't receiving healing don't mature and grow oftentimes in the areas where they are wounded. That's why we want to bring healing. One of the many reasons we want not just to relieve people of pain, which is important too, but to allow them to mature and to allow them to grow. And if you don't have a place of healing and freedom, you're being told every single feeling you have is because it's gossip and slander when those people are actually the ones who were abused. It's an awful place for people to be in, caught in a trap of being told everything that they feel and think is is caused by the accuser of the brethren, and it's all gossip and slander, and it's all their problem. That is a sick, sick place to be.
But
And
can you
people end up,
imagine, though, Nathan? Can you imagine that happening in any other part of life? It does, but put this in something non-platformish, non outside of the spiritual holy world, right?
mm-hmm.
Could you imagine telling a rape victim, "Shut up"?
Yeah, right,
I mean,
right.
you really didn't get raped, or even if you did, let's just be
Hmm.
quiet about it because so and
Yes, be
so.
quiet. Yeah.
I don't think any of us could imagine. Oh, your parents abusing you, beating you. You're an abused spouse.
Hmm.
Oh, just shut up and take it, man. Don't tell it. That might hurt that
Yeah,
might hurt their career.
right,
Are you kidding me? Can you
right.
imagine telling
I
somebody
know.
that? That's got
Yep.
to be the
Well, it
most
gets,
unloving thing ever.
well, and I'm going to actually speak on this, Keith. I wrote something out. I'm going to do a short video on it and release it. But sometimes what you have is you have people being really confused about, let's say, a leader that is now being exposed and all these people are wounded by them. And they're like, well, that wasn't my experience. He was always kind to me.
Hmm.
He was always loving to me. He always promoted me. He was always there for me. And I'm like, I can validate and recognize that was your experience. But put it this way. I realize this is an extreme way to say this, but you brought up someone being raped. It's like, well, a rapist doesn't rape every single person in their life. You understand what I mean? A rapist may, I know this for sure, can rape one person or two people that they had over here, and then treat all these other people with what seems like kindness and love.
Yeah.
Does that then it, does does that mean that they're not a rapist?
No.
Just because my experience was they were nice to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like we would never
No.
do that in
100%.
that kind of instance. But somehow now, because this group of people over here, well, they were always awesome ministering to me. They always gave me accurate prophetic words, and they were always kind and loving. They always promoted me or were there for me. Well, I'm really glad that was your experience. But these 50 people over here who were massively wounded, that wasn't their experience. Just like a murderer doesn't murder everyone.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? A
Yeah.
murderer maybe murdered three people. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. Just because somebody says something doesn't make it true. At the same
Yeah.
time, just because you didn't experience something that they said which might have been true doesn't make it untrue. And the
Hmm.
closest I can put this is, listen, when the whole stuff came out about Bill Cosby, I did not want
Hmm.
that to be true. He was
Hmm.
Heathcliff Huxtable. He was Jello
Heck
Pudding
yeah.
Pops. He was,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
Cosby Kids and Fat Albert. He was a lot of
Yeah.
childhood stuff. So he
Well, forget about
couldn't
New
have been this.
Coke, but
Oh,
yeah,
well, we all have to forget about New Coke.
we won't
But,
talk about New Coke. But anyways, go ahead.
I mean, we're all allowed certain mistakes. But, you
Yeah, I mean,
know,
yeah, it's Grace.
I mean, it doesn't. It's completely against every public persona and what millions and millions and millions of people knew about that individual, but it didn't make the other part untrue.
Hmm.
So
Right.
that's
Yes,
more
that's
for
exactly
people.
right.
That's more honestly. That's probably more for church members who say, "Oh no, I've sat under Pastor so and so for years. That is an absolute lie." It might be, but it might not
Hmm.
be. And before you make that decision,
Yeah.
you better look into it. Period.
Yeah. Right. Well, I'm thinking uh one of the key examples to go to just kind of as we're wrapping this up
Hmm.
is the Bereans. And I'm always shocked at how many people never even heard of the Bereans. Um so um it would be good to just read and ask yourself, are the Bereans gossipers and slanderers? Are they the accusers of the brethren? Um, so if you actually look at Acts 17:10 and following, do you want to go ahead and read that?
How
Like
far down do you want to
maybe
go?
down,
Just
let's see. Uh, well, probably just go down to verse 11. So 10 and 11.
Okay, the brethren immediately sent Paul and Silas away by night to Berea. And when they arrived, they went into the synagogue of the Jews. Now, these were more noble minded than those in Thessalonica, for they received the word with great eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see whether these things were so.
So whatever, Paul and Silas brought the gospel, right, into Berea, and they're actually called noble-minded for not just sucking it in hook, line, and sinker, but examining the scriptures daily to see. They didn't just go, "Oh, Paul must be right. I guess they're right on." They're like, "Let's examine the scriptures to see." And Paul and Silas didn't go, "Dude, you guys are a bunch of accusers of the brethren, you gossipers and slanderers. Like, you don't believe everything we say and swallow it right now." They're like, no, they're actually called noble-minded for going to the Word of God, going to the scriptures, and actually seeing if what they're saying is in fact so. And they were commended for that. So I just want to say, like, go to the scriptures. If what they're saying is incorrect, then calling them on it is not gossip and slander. It's being consistent with the scriptures, exactly what the Bereans did.
That's an awesome point. You actually
So
can think for yourself.
believe it or not, Keith, we all have a Bible. Most of us can read, and we all have brains, and we can actually read it for ourselves and go, does that seem really to line up with what the scripture says about lots of things, like the Jezebel spirit, like the things I'm being taught when there's like 5-hour sermons and whole conferences on the Jezebel spirit? Is this biblical? Is this what I find in the Word of God? It's on us to kind of go, where is that? And like,
Yeah,
is that verifiable? You know.
crazy.
So one of the things I wanted to jump on before we have to wrap this up
Mm-hmm.
is you hear a lot of this thing like, you have a spirit of offense. You ever heard that? And that's tied to gossip and slander.
Absolutely.
And first of all, I looked in vain all over the Bible for a spirit of offense. That doesn't exist, by the way. I I was very diligent to try and figure that out. So then I tried to even find the concept in the Bible of this, at least in the New Testament, of offense, like that leads to gossip and slander. Like, I'm offended. Because I've heard this being like a big sin too. Like, we never want to be offended ever on anything. And the interesting thing that I found in the New Testament was offense is almost never framed as "I'm offended with you." It's almost always framed as I like, you don't want to offend someone else, like hurt them, specifically a younger person. You see what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
More of a,
It,
that
it's
sounds
it's
very
never.
more, much more loving.
Yes.
Considerate.
And I just want to point that, yes, and I just want to point that out. Um, in Matthew 18, verse 7, where he says, "Woe to the world because of its stumbling blocks," or you could translate that, its offense. "For it is inevitable that stumbling blocks come, but woe to that man through whom the stumbling blocks come," or that could also be translated offense. So, in other words, the way the word offense is used is that you're hurting someone. You are causing a stumbling block to someone else, who's trying to come to God. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That is an offense. It's almost never framed as like you have an offense because somebody hurt you. You see what I'm saying? But that's how it is now. It's like, if anybody hurts you, comes at you, says anything mean about you, and you are offended, this is like the biggest sin ever. Like, we can't ever be offended about anything. And that's not, you just don't see that. You don't see that in the New Testament. You see offense being keeping someone from coming to truth or coming to the gospel.
Yeah. Man, for some of the people who are making that claim, you might want to read that one very slowly 2 or 3 times because that's almost scary.
Yeah.
That's a warning right there, man. Because
Mhm.
a lot of the stuff that you may be doing, right? If what you're being accused of is true,
Hmm.
That's more than a stumbling block, man. That's more of a wall.
Yes, very much so. So again, the stumbling block is the stumbling block of offense. Like you are causing an offense that's keeping someone from coming to the Lord. Like this is really
Wow.
the force of the word offense. Not like somehow you had a reaction to someone stabbing you and that's bad. You know, now of course,
That
I mean
hurt.
that's like what
How
people are
dare you
saying.
hurt? Yeah.
Yeah, how dare you bleed on my clothes? I mean, that's how it's framed. Like we should never be offended ever about anything. Now, I do understand. I do understand the force of that. In other words, like if somebody hurt me in terms of what they said or did to me, I don't want to carry in my heart unforgiveness, towards them.
Mhm.
That would create some kind of offense in me. Like that's not good.
Yeah.
In
Especially
other
if they
words, like
didn't
if
mean it.
somebody's hurt me,
Especially if
yeah,
the intent
exactly.
wasn't there.
Um, right. But either way, in either case, like we're called to forgive, so we never want to hold an offense, if you want to think of it like that.
Hmm.
Like if somebody has hurt me, I need to forgive and release them. Not because I give a crap about them, because I give a crap about me. In other words, like holding that stuff in your heart hurts you. It doesn't necessarily hurt them, but it definitely hurts you.
Yeah.
So you want to release that, also to be honoring to Jesus, to say like, you've forgiven me, therefore, this is all over the Bible, right? You've forgiven me, therefore I will forgive them. Because I've been forgiven much. That's what scripture says. He who has been forgiven much loves much. So if I know that I've been forgiven and washed clean, certainly I'm going to offer that same unconditional forgiveness and love to somebody else. So I'm going to forgive them. It doesn't mean I'm going to trust them. It doesn't necessarily mean, but it does mean I'm going to release anger and ask for healing for my hurt in regards to them so I can release them and hold nothing in my heart but love towards them. But that's not what's usually being said. What's being said is like somebody stabbed you in the face with a butcher knife and you're supposed to not feel pain or bleed. And if you do, you're offended. you know? So that's
Crazy.
usually how this is framed. You've heard it like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, that
And
goes
that's
back
just
to a
crazy.
part of the improper use of gossip and slander
Hmm.
to discount or devalue anybody else's thoughts, arguments, or experience.
That is correct. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to stay away from and confront actual gossip and slander, but we don't want to conform to what is now being defined as gossip and slander because that is control and cult like. So, what I did was I created also, this is the quote out of my book, a checklist to help people discern between what is gossip and slander and what is revelation and discernment.
This is awesome. Please
So,
share.
yeah. So I made a quick checklist, very quick checklist. So I can go, okay, Lord, am I involved in gossip and slander, or is this in my heart in any way? Or is this actually revelation and discernment? So here's my very quick checklist. Number one, is what I'm hearing edifying to the church? In other words, is what I'm actually hearing in my heart um, edifying, building the church up, which could also include calling things out that are unholy? So that's number one. Number two, is what I'm hearing from the Lord and coming from a place of love, or is it simply to point out someone's sin or bad behavior? So in other words, if I what I'm hearing from the Lord is this, am I simply motivated to point out somebody's sin because I want to feel superior, or is this actually coming from a place of love and concern? So that's number two. Number three, am I jealous of a leader or of someone else's favor, or am I actually concerned about their welfare? These are heart checklists. And the reason I made them heart checklists is because it's about the heart, right? It's about intent, it's about reality. So I have to ask myself, am I actually jealous of this leader or someone else's favor? Because oftentimes it's framed that way. Like they'll say, like, well, the only reason you could possibly ever have anything against me in any way is because you're jealous of me and you're envious of me. Well, is that true? Or am I actually concerned about their welfare? I'm actually concerned about them and about those they influence. So you feel like you're going to say something there.
No, I'm following along the checklist. I'm with you.
Okay, the next checklist, am I operating from a place of pain or trauma, or is what I'm hearing really shedding light on a problem that needs to be addressed? So, am I actually coming from a place of simple pain and trauma, or am I actually hearing something? I'm actually having a problem revealed. And so, that's a simple, easy checklist just to check your heart. Where am I coming from? Where am I operating? And making sure that I'm actually having revelation and discernment, and it's not gossip and slander. My even if you're the weird thing is even if your heart is, I don't know anybody operates from absolute pure perfection all the time. I mean, there oftentimes like if you've been hurt, there's may still be an element of hurt and pain there, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're operating in gossip and slander. It could mean that you're just, I don't know anybody has 100% pure motives on everything they do, but that still there's the overarching motivation of truth, setting people free, righteousness, holiness, justice, and an allegiance to Jesus. That's really motivating me here, and not simply envy or jealousy or the desire to tear someone down because I just don't like them or whatever.
That's the perfect checklist. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure. Normally, I would ask, do you have anything to wrap it up? Certainly, if you have anything, you can share. But that seems like it really does it, because it does give you something not only to evaluate things you hear, but evaluate the things that you may bring to light before doing so.
Right. So we know, like, when Jesus was calling the Pharisees, you could absolutely call that slander. You brood of viper. He's doing this publicly.
Yeah.
He's very public about this. You brood of vipers. You whitewash tombs. You make people twice as son of hell as yourself. That's slander. Is
If
that
it's
not slander?
false, if it's false.
If it's, there you go. That's what I was going to say. If it's false, but we know Jesus never sinned, so therefore Jesus could never slander. So what he's saying is the truth, and he's motivated by the truth. Jesus is motivated by the truth to expose publicly leaders who were in sin.
Yeah.
Yeah, people saying like, well, I've seen comments on some of the exposure stuff like, well, Jesus wouldn't do that. And I'm like, do you have a Bible? He is yelling from the rooftops that these people are sick and twisted and they're a brood of vipers and their motives are disgusting. He's screaming this stuff. He's not even doing this. He didn't Matthew 18, nobody. He didn't take the Pharisees aside and go, hold on, I got to talk to you. I got to Matthew 18 you. Let me
Oh,
talk
let
to
me
you
go get
before
a
I
few
take
other
another
guys
person.
now, and then we'll
Let
come
me
with you.
get a few disciples to rebuke you, and then finally maybe the church. No, he's just like, you guys suck, because he's motivated by protecting people and exposing them. And so clearly this wasn't slander because Jesus doesn't sin. So what he did was motivated by pure love to bring truth and righteousness into the air and set people free.
Including the
And we
people
just
that
need
he
to make
called
sure.
out. Very much including the people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And some of the Pharisees repented. Some of the first believers were Pharisees, so they did repent. And he did lead them into the light. So the reality is he was motivated by love and truth and bringing people to freedom. And we need to make sure we're motivated by love and truth and bringing people to freedom, and that what we're saying is in fact true. And we'll stay out of gossip and slander, but don't allow yourself to be shut up, pushed away, capped off, labeled, smothered by the accusation of gossip, slander, Jezebel, accuser of the brethren, or you have offense. I don't think Jesus was offended personally,
Nope.
by them. I think he was offended that they were hurting other people.
So maybe not everybody needs to burn everything down, but you could flip a table or two in the process.
I mean, as long as it's God,
Yep.
you know, Jesus is not a pacifist, and it's just bizarre the way he gets painted sometimes. I'm like, dude, I wish we have recordings. Like, here's Jesus, like, you brood of vipers. So I mean, it's like, what the heck? I'm sure he's not going, you know, you brood of vipers. I mean, I don't think that's probably how he said it, you probably make people twice as son of hell of yourselves. I mean, I really don't think that's the intonation of his voice. And in the Greek, it's kind of clear that's absolutely not what's happening, which is why you get exclamation points at the end in your English Bible
Oh,
when
I
he
love
says
it.
these things. woe to you, Chorazim, like stuff like that. He's not like, now woe to you. I mean, that is not how he's coming at this, you know?
That's huge. I will spend the rest of my day thinking about that. Jesus stopped journaling for a little while, put down his communion
Yeah.
juice, and
Yeah.
so funny.
We're going to go rebuke some people now. Everyone sit down. I don't want to hurt your feelings. Let me make sure y'all understand where I'm coming from. Let me, like, he just didn't do that.
Oh man. Don't want to offend you.
Don't offend you guys, you know? So let me make sure you understand what I mean when I say whitewash tombs. Like, I don't, I just don't see that.
Not that there's anything wrong with whitewashing, but
Yeah.
this isn't good at the
Something wrong
moment.
with being a whitewash tomb, but let me just tell you.
So people like that. So,
Yes, exactly.
oh man. Well, I don't know. Everything's downhill from that moment.
Oh,
So,
it sure is. It
oh
sure is.
man. Listen, if anybody wants to gossip or slander, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, they want to gossip and slander. They can go to rocksaltcoaching.com and let Keith know
Oh,
how
that's
bad I
awesome.
suck at life and gossip and slander me to him.
Oh, that's huge. But if they want to edify somebody and lift them up in love, Nathan, where shall they go?
If you would like to edify me and lift me up, then click on the give link on unleashedministries.net.
And by the way, we need
And
some people to do some heavy lifting.
that would be amazing. And yeah, if you just want to pray for me or just whatever, if you want to go to unleashedministries.net, you can click on the media link. You'll get my YouTube page and all the teachings that we have from my personal podcast. And if you scroll down a little farther on the page, you'll actually see Soul Brothers down there, this podcast. You click on that. And or you click on contact me and you can email me with a bunch of glowing words about how awesome you think I am. That would
For
be
sure.
amazing. So you can uplift me.
So we love everybody. Hopefully, keep your fingers crossed. It won't be another month before you hear from us. And in the meantime, I'm gonna go put on my string tank top and run through the run through and pick up a guitar somewhere.
I just had an amazing visual. Thank you, Jesus, for that. All right.
All right, everybody, go spread that rumor. We love you. Bye.
Yes, thank you, Lord.